While Kanye West and other celebrities use people like Larry Hoover's name to get themselves free publicities, the very people they claim to be helping just get buried deeper very often. Now, companies tied to Gangster Disciples co-founder Larry Hoover and his family and supporters are just now facing new federal scrutiny. A grand jury in Chicago has subpoenaed records on the businesses and what a source says is a, quote, active investigation. Not so ironically, the grand jury was formed the same year Hoover began his unsuccessful bid to be released early from prison. Companies linked, according to records obtained by the Chicago Sun-Times, a federal grand jury has subpoenaed the Illinois Secretary of State's office for the incorporation records of 22 companies, including the Larry Hoover Project, LLC, and the Larry Hoover Senior Legal Defense Fund. The subpoena, dated January 13th, is part of an active investigation, a police source told the newspaper. Federal prosecutors have yet to give a comment on the case. Now, no one's been charged with any crime in connection with anything yet. And the grand jury was impaneled back in 2020, the year Hoover began his quest for a sentencing break under the Federal First Step Act. Among other things, that law, which was signed by Donald Trump, allows federal convicts to seek reductions in their sentences for selling crack, but that's not what Hoover's in for. It's murder, but it still applies for him. And Hoover's lawyer, Justin Moore, said he hasn't been contacted by federal authorities and doesn't know what the grand jury is looking into.
Well, anytime you do a extensive amount of time, it can have two effects. It can harden you, or it can make you think. And I thought I want to do something for the community. I see these kids coming in here every day with 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Their life wasted just like I wasted mine. Because ideologies, street gangs, one teenager don't like the other teenager because the way he wears his hat. Because his ideology is different from his. A disciple don't like a vice lord.
Now, I don't know what Larry Hoover does or doesn't do, but the feds have had him in the most restrictive federal prison in the country for many years. They read his incoming and outgoing mail. They restrict even his legal visits to the bare minimum. How could he realistically be running or having much knowledge at all of any elaborate criminal operations? If he does, then they might as well close down Florence ADX. What would be the point? Hoover is 71, and he was described by a federal judge last year as, quote, one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois history. He's serving a life sentence at the federal Supermax prison in Colorado. In 1997, he was convicted of running a criminal enterprise that authorities said oversaw $100 million a year drug operations in Chicago and other cities, of course, associated with the GDs.
Street gangs is a fact. They've been a part of society, this society, since the early 1900s. And they're a fact that you can't get around them.
After 5 decades of prison, the last 25 of them held in isolation, his lawyer said Hoover deserves to go free. Quote, Hoover deserves to be judged on who he is today. I hope our justice system will allow him to return home to live out his final days with his family. Now, last summer, U.S. District Judge Harry Leinenweber denied Hoover's request for the new sentencing hearing. He wrote a 19-page order, and he referred to the 70-year-old as one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois history. And though the judge wrote that Hoover's life sentence at the federal Supermax prison in Colorado is particularly grim, he said that he's concerned about an active risk of harm if Hoover were free. Quote, Hoover is renowned and celebrated to this day by the GDs, but also by people like Kanye West. And to the extent that any one person can deter another to commit crimes, Hoover's life imprisonment symbolically demonstrates the rule of law reaches even those in power who seem untouchable. Well, Larry Hoover doesn't seem untouchable. He's been in prison his whole life. But the judge did issue the order without prejudice, meaning Hoover has an opportunity to try again, and his lawyer, Justin Moore, said that's rare, so that's a good thing. Hoover can't try again. Quote, I don't think this is a ruling that closes the door for Larry Hoover to be released. And his lawyer noted that Hoover is serving a sentence in isolation, like I said, and can do little more than read books. Quote, how do we explain to the court the oppressive conditions he's in? Are prisons used to rehabilitate inmates or in a punishing fashion? Now, among other things, the First Step Act allows federal prisoners, like I said, to seek reductions in their sentences for selling crack. That was enacted in 2010, but this new judge has supported previous decisions to release co-defendants under Hoover, like Hoover's case under the First Step Act. Some crimes are... Now, the prosecutor said Landon Weber, the judge, was right on the money when he described Hoover as one of Illinois' most notorious criminals. Quote, Hoover ran a gang from prison that was responsible for the highest murder rate the city has ever seen, a drug network that was pervasive and efficient, an organization that called controlled parks and street corners and made it impossible for kids to go outside. Well, it's kind of ridiculous to lay that all at his feet. I mean, you're saying when Chicago had 1,000 murders a year, it was mostly from the gangster disciples. In a past story, I pointed out that right before the GDs became public enemy number one in Chicago, law enforcement was saying the same exact things about Jeff Fort and the L. Rookins, a.k.a. the Black Pea Stones. And once they got hit, then the GDs suddenly were responsible for everything, let the prosecutors tell it. Now let's take a look at some of the Illinois prisoners who've been paroled while Hoover has been denied. Wielding a hatchet, a guy named Otis Williams slaughtered a man and woman in Kankakee County in 1974 to keep them to talking to the police about fruit and vegetables and cigarettes he'd stolen. He was convicted, and him and his accomplice got prison terms of 800 to 2,400 years. In 2013, making his 30th appearance before the parole board, he finally got paroled. The board said he was remorseful, a model inmate, and no risk to the public. He was paroled by a vote of 11-4. 2 years later, his accomplice was also paroled. Then there was another guy who massacred 5 people in a shooting spree at a restaurant. And they're among dozens of Illinois murder convicts who've won parole over the past decade, a Chicago Sun-Times examination found. Now, the fact that they were able to go free does offer a glimmer of hope to Larry Hoover, despite the fact that he got 100 to 150 years in the state pen for ordering the hit of another gang member. And like that guy Williams and his co-D, Hoover was assigned a C number from Illinois Department of Corrections. C numbers refer to those people sentenced to state prison before 1978. That was the year the state did away with indeterminate sentences that gave a range of years instead of a fixed term, which Hoover has. And today, those convicted of first-degree murder in Illinois must serve their sentences without any possibility of parole, but he was convicted before 78. And so he has a C number, and he is entitled to a parole hearing every 5 years, which I don't think he's getting. Jennifer Sobel, executive director of the Illinois Prison Project, says the parole board seems to be, quote, more receptive in recent years to C-number inmates' requests for paroles. One of her C-number clients, a 68-year-old, was paroled in March. He shot a guy in 1975 for a $5,500 robbery. He got 100 to 300 years, twice as long as Hoover. According to Sobel, the remaining number of inmates with C numbers is down to about 100 from a peak of more than 16,000. The question now is, will Larry Hoover ever benefit from this reform? And will celebrities ever stop using his name to benefit themselves? Al Prophet, American Dope.